Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are filming my first sit-down review in quite some time. We've been focusing more on the out-and-about vlogs recently, but I've got some nice beers that are sitting there, and I think we will need to start working our way through these. So yeah, for this one, we are going to stick to Sweden, and where better to start than the oldest craft brewery in the country. So we're going to go a little bit to the south of Stockholm today to a wee place called Nynäshamn, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri. And these guys have featured on the channel many times before. But this particular beer is called Ångbryggeriets 25-Årsöl. It comes in at 4.8% ABV, and this one is a Kölsch ale. So yeah, as we know, Kölsch comes from Köln. Usually very nice, very light drinkable beers, and we know that Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri tend to shine when it comes to traditional German and English beer styles. So I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store in the bottle form. I have actually tried this one on tap. As I've mentioned in the little reintroduction video, I guess we could call it, I am working a little bit in the Bishop's Arms and Gustav Adolfs Torg in Malmo, so come say hello. But we did have this beer on tap not long after I started. But yeah, looking forward to this. Let's crack on and see how we go. So as always, we'll talk a little bit about the brewery's history before we get started on the tasting. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews I've done from Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri. No doubt more will be added to that later on, and we've got all the channel's social media down there. And please do consider subscribing to the channel if you would like to see some more beer reviews. But anyway, let's get on to the brewery history, and then we can taste the beer. So, Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in a little place called Nynäshamn to the south of Stockholm, and the company was founded back in 1997. So the brewery finds its origins in the Haggis Bears Club, which was an organisation started by some friends who used to like to go on expeditions around Europe to visit various different breweries, so to like Belgium, Germany, Czech, and so on. But the main reason for this was that Sweden was very much lacking in a choice of beer at the time, so they had to go abroad to actually try all these different things. But in 1993, the club decided that they needed a permanent venue for themselves, so they took an old warehouse and converted it into a pub and breakfast bar, and this actually proved to be very, very popular with the locals. So the guys began to brew after taking a home brewing course in Stockholm back in 1994, and apparently in the early 1990s there had been a small brewery in the town that used the name Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri, so they decided that they would resurrect this name and use it again, and so many of their beers are named after things on the local archipelago because they really wanted the beers to have this kind of local vibe, if you like. But they had a small brewery that they built largely themselves, and in the spring of 1997 they launched their first and now flagship beer, the Bederu Bitter, which I reviewed for you a number of years ago, but this was launched at the Harbour Party that year in Nynäshamn. But a visit from Michael Jackson, the beer hunter, in 2000 inspired the brewery, and they continued to brew despite the very long hours and hard work that they were putting in. You know, they were doing pretty much everything by hand at that point, but they were rewarded in 2002 with medals at the Stockholm Beer Festival and also a permanent spot in the Systembolaget range. But in 2006 the brewery moved into their current premises, and they put a lot into renovating this place. I believe there was a lot of volunteers that actually came to help them as well, and they got a lot of help from local tradesmen and stuff like that. But they also finally managed to secure an automated bottling machine in 2009, which meant they could finally stop the really, really long working hours. But over the last few years they've continued to expand, and in 2019 they brewed around 900,000 litres of beer. That's the latest figure I've found in terms of their brewing capacity, but as of September 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 130 different kinds of beers, and like I mentioned earlier, they are best known for their traditional German styles of beer and also the traditional English stuff as well. Personally, I really like the Landsort Lager and the Pikla Pils. Those are both very, very nice, especially on tap actually. But yeah, that's everything we really need to say about Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri. Again, if you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website in the video description below. But I think we can get started and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So a little quick look at the artwork before we open this one up. As you can see, it is in the typical Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri style. There you can see the Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri symbol. That usually is on the bottle cap as well, but of course they've got a special bottle cap this time, so I will need to keep this one. But yeah, it says on the side here, our brewery has turned 25 years old. We think that we are still doing the best that we know. brewing beer in the traditional styles. To celebrate, we have brewed a beer in the German style. All ingredients that are brewing, they've made a pilsner with this, but then used an ale yeast to ferment it, they're saying, and the result is a very fresh beer that fits perfect with a sunny day on the coast, basically. But this beer, it uses a top fermenting yeast brewed with pilsner and wheat malt, and it's hopped with Magnum, Pearl, and Sats. And as with all our other beers, it's unpasteurized and brewed with care and love. So nice. So yeah, we've got traditional, we've got a bit of German and Czech hops in this one, Magnum, Pearl, and Sats, we all know quite well. And then, basically a pilsner with an ale yeast. So this should be quite an interesting one. I remember this being a really nice, just drinkable beer. But yeah, I believe I paid about 30 kroner for this, something like that, through Systembolaget. So that's about €3, £2.70 sterling, a little, about $3 American at today's exchange rate, something like that, maybe $3.30. But yeah, nicely presented beer. This one, as always, with Nynäshamn, it's in a half-litre bottle, but let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. So yeah, the 4.8% Ångbryggeriets 25-Årsöl, their 25th anniversary cool style ale, I guess we could call it. Let's get this guy out then. A nice little bit of smoke on the opening, and we'll get it out and into the glass. I probably could have used my Stein for this, come to think of it, but yeah, I quite like the tulip glasses because these are the best. For me, the tulip glass is the best all-round beer glass. It works with pretty much any style, and this is a slightly thicker tulip glass as well, so that's kind of good for lagers. You do want a slightly thicker rim when it comes to lager beers because they are meant to be drunk, sessioned, gulped if you like. But yeah, this looks very, very nice, I have to say. So as you can see with this one, it's poured a lovely kind of bright golden straw colour. We've maybe got about 80% of it into the glass just now, about 400 millilitres. But you can see when it's poured with about a half finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head. That is fading away just to be a very kind of thin foamy layer though. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, but you can see there is quite a steady stream of carbonation just going up toward the top of the glass there, or up toward the head. So yeah, in terms of what you would expect from a Kölsch ale, this pretty much has everything, I would say. Lovely bright golden straw colour. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on the type of malts you use, the length of your wort boil, and of course any barrel aging or adjuncts that you do, or any adjuncts that you put in can affect it too. But yeah, in terms of a Kölsch ale, you would expect this, or Kölsch style ale, I guess we should call it, Kölsch type ale, you would just expect a nice kind of pale golden straw colour. So yeah, completely clear, filtered, I guess. But yeah, I don't think there's anything else we really need to say about the appearance of this one. So let's take a wee look at the aroma and see what we have. Oh yeah, that's very nice. That is very nice, very straightforward. So for me, the first thing you're getting out of this is just a lovely crisp. You get the impression of a lovely kind of crisp, drinkable beer. So with the malt base then, you can smell, you get a little bit of that kind of fresh bread crust. You can smell the crispness of the Pilsner malts, of course, and you get a bit of the breadiness of the wheat malt too. So yeah, backbone is a nice kind of fresh, slightly grainy bread crust. Yeah, nice fresh, slightly grainy bread crust, absolutely. On top of that, you can smell like a fresh white bread. There is a little bit of a... you do get like that big kind of thick fluffy white bread, like a fresh hedgehog roll. A little bit of a more kind of, there's a bit of a crackery note to this as well, but of course you're getting some nice kind of biscuity notes as well, again from the Pilsner malt. It's a bit like a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing, and I really like that. It has, I would say that this beer really leans toward the kind of sweeter side of the spectrum too, so yeah, bread crust, definitely some kind of more crispy white bread, if that makes sense, then a softer white bread on top. That'll be the wheat malt. You can get a little bit of the wheatiness, like a little touch of the wheaty bitiness in the back of the nose. I actually don't know how common it is for them to use wheat malt in Kölsch. That's something I would need to look up. I've not looked at the brew sheet for a Kölsch style ale. Maybe this is just something they've done to to give a little bit of body to the beer and stuff like this. I'm not quite sure. But then on top of that, of course, like I say, you've got that lovely kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity note to it. I don't know if I would quite describe it as honey, but it's quite an oily biscuity note that you get out of this one, and you can smell some of that crispness in the top of the nose. You're definitely getting some of that crispness from the Pilsner malt that's in there. So yeah, malty wise, this one kind of gives you everything that you would want. So yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me. On the hoppy side of things then, I don't think we need to say anything else about the malty side of the beer. Just fired a wee bit out of the glass there. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, it's kind of what you would expect from these more noble type hops. You've got a little bit of earthiness in there. You can definitely smell that big, slightly spicy floral aromaticity. For me, most of the spice will come from the Magnum and from the Sats. The Czech Sats have always, generally speaking, the Czech hops I've always found to be a little bit more floral and spicy than the German ones. The German ones are very bright. The Slovenian ones are very, very smooth. In my experience, the Austrian hops I don't have too much in the way of experience with to have noticed a big difference. But yeah, for me, Sats is more spicy. The German ones are more kind of bright, and the Slovenian ones are very smooth. But for me, yeah, lovely little touch of earthiness to it. A nice deep, slightly spicy floral aromaticity, and then you've got a more kind of oily and bright grassiness, which will be more from the German side of things. So yeah, it'll be the Pearl and the Magnum that are giving you that. Most likely the Pearl, I would say. But yeah, Pearl, not had, to my knowledge, I've not had Pearl hops in a beer that I've reviewed in quite a wee while. But yeah, this one on the hoppy side of things, it's very nice. It starts to lean more toward an oily, grassy note later on, the more that you smell it. And then yeah, you're starting to get a little bit of fruit out of it too. So on the fruity side of things, it is kind of what you'd expect. You've got a little bit of that sort of sultana, dry white green grapey. I think for those of you who are not sure what sultanas are, but then you've also got a little bit of this more oily peary note to it, a little bit of a kind of bright green apple maybe. So yeah, definitely a bit of an oily peary sort of thing, a little bit of a sultana type note, maybe a wee tiny touch of like dry apricot, and then yeah, kind of oily apple note, and then you start to mix in with all the sort of grassy, then yeah, you really start to mix in with all the kind of grassy, wet grassy aromas after that. So yeah, I mean, the way that goes together is very, very nice. It really does smell like a Kölsch, if you like, but you've got the Pilsner crispness and sweetness in there obviously as well. So yeah, really interesting beer. I actually can't remember what this was like on tap, but I know it was good. But you're not going to be let down by pretty much any beer that you get from Nynäshamn with these traditional type ones. So I just think it's about time that we have a taste of this then. As I always say though, take a bit of a smell of the beer before you get stuck into it. That is always half the experience when it comes to craft beer. But yeah, let's have a taste then. So this one is the Ångbryggeriets 25-Årsöl from Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri in Nynäshamn, a little bit to the south of Stockholm, a 4.8% Kölsch style ale. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers, and happy 25th anniversary to Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri. Nice to be back doing some sit-down reviews. Cheers, slange, skål. Oh yeah. Now one thing I will say is that this is really, compared to what I remember it being on the tap, it's really actually lighter and crisper from what I remember. That's the first thing that strikes me about this one. It's a very light, very crisp beer. I can't remember when this was actually released through Systembolaget, so we do have to remember that some of the kind of bubbles and things might be affected. Some of the carbonation might be affected slightly by how long this beer's been sitting in the bottle. But yeah, I think it does go together really nicely. And yeah, I mean, in terms of what you would expect from a Kölsch, it delivers on that kind of flavour profile. You've got a lovely oily sweetness to it, nice wee bit of crispness, nice wee bit of hoppiness. It delivers. It gives you everything you would want. So let's break it down and analyse it properly, as we always do. And that's the last of the beer into the glass. Let me just line this up so it looks nice. But yeah, so malt base first off then. So middle third of your palate, You can feel the backbone of that. You've got a little bit of that fresh hedgehog white bread crust in there. That is forming the backbone of the beer. On top of that, you get a slightly... You can feel the sort of wheat smoothing out the white bready characteristics of this beer, which is quite nice. So certainly a good little bit of that coming out. Nice kind of crisp white bready note in there on the top as well. So yeah, you know, slightly dry bread crust, a smoother, slightly dense white bready layer from the wheat, and then you can feel a slightly crisper white bread on top of that. On top of all of that, of course, you get a nice circle in the middle of your palate, and that's the kind of brown sugary side of the beer. So toward the back of that middle third of your palate, you can feel the crispness from the Pilsner malt coming out. So as you move further forward, you start to get the sweeter side of things. It has got a little touch of like a honey note to it, but as you move further and further into the centre of the palate, you can feel that the intensity of those brown sugars really start to kind of come out, and of course that is the boozy side of the beer. The alcohol, I think, always comes out. The alcohol sweetness always comes out in the middle of your palate. So yeah, dead centre of your palate, you can feel that sort of concentrated, slightly boozy side of the beer, and as you move out, it just becomes a little bit more crisp and like a McVitie's digestive biscuit, and then you get a little touch of honey coming out of it the further you go into the aftertaste. So that's really nice. I like the sweet side of this beer. I think this is potentially slightly sweeter than some of the Kölsches you're going to come across. But yeah, Kölsch is a style that I do need to familiarise myself with a little bit more. I've had a few of them, not all that many. But yeah, I do need to familiarise myself with those a little bit more. So, I think that's everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate, other than maybe toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you've got a very slight woodiness in there. But yeah, at the back of that front third of the palate, you have not the back of the front third, on the back third of the palate, I should say, you can feel the yeasty characters coming into this one a wee bit more. So base of the back third of the palate, again, you've got a bit more of that grainy bready sort of thing, and it does get a little bit more dry flake. Remember, more bitter flavours come out further back on the palate, the sweeter ones come out further forward. On top of all of that, you've got a slightly thicker bready note coming out of the beer. It's a little bit more airy, and you can also feel there's a wee touch of like an almost peppery kind of note in there too. But yeah, you can definitely feel the kind of yeasty character sitting on top of all of that. You get that more airy white bready sort of note to this one. So yeah, you can feel the flavour in the back third of the palate is slightly taller, and as you come further forward, it just condenses down a wee bit. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. Let's focus on the hoppy side of things. So back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness. You're always going to get this from these types of beer. So yeah, nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, you get a little bit of a herbal character out of it, and then yeah, as you move toward the kind of front corners of your palate, you have that kind of slightly deeper floral aromaticity. It's not quite as spicy, I will say that. This beer is not as spicy in its floral aromaticity. It's not as spicy as the aroma gave you the impression it was going to be. Those are the words I'm looking for here. But round the front curve of the palate, you've got a little more of a kind of wetter, grassy sort of note out of it, and I think that comes across as distinctively German. It's just got that little bit of brightness to it, whereas the floral character is a bit more spicy. It's got the Czech. That's the Czech Sats, I think, that's doing that. So Pearl on the front and Sats on the side, and I think the Magnum's probably giving you some of that floral character too. But yeah, hoppy side of things is quite nice with this one, and it just rounds off the beer well. But front third of your palate then, the fruity side of things. So the border between front third and middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of a smooth bready note there, and underneath that front third of your palate, it does have just a little bit of white bread and maybe a little touch of sweetness too. But at the back of that front third of your palate, you're getting the sort of, for me, you're getting a little bit of that dry sultana, dry white green grapey sort of thing in there. That's what's coming out for me. And as you move further forward, you get a little touch of a kind of more dry apricot-y note, and then you start to get like an oily pear, and almost on the tip of the tongue, just a wee bit of a kind of brighter green apple sort of thing. So yeah, definitely I would stick with that. Little bit, as I say, sultanas, then a little bit a very light touch of dried apricot, but then you get the oily, kind of peary sort of thing, and then a little bit of that, green apple on the kind of tip of your tongue, and that mixes in with all the grassy esters at the front tip of the palate. But yeah, I think this is a solid beer. Is it my favourite one I've had from Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri? I think it's probably quite hard to tip either Landsort or Pikla Pils off the top spot, to be honest with you. But is it a nice sort of Kölsch ale, drinkable ale? It is. You know, it's up to the standards that you would expect of Nynäshamn. But yeah, I think this is very, very nice. So yeah, it gets a big thumbs up from me, this one, from the flavour perspective. So let's round off the review with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel. Yeah, so for me, I would say it's kind of at the top end of light bodied, bottom end of mid bodied. It's kind of somewhere in there. I would be curious to compare this to a Köln brewed Kölsch. Can't speak. I would be curious to see what the difference in the mouthfeel is. For me, it's got this kind of, it's very clean and very light, but at the same time it has a little bit of oiliness to it. You do get a degree of crispness to this beer as well. In terms of IBUs, I think this is maybe about 25, somewhere in that kind of region. The malt base, as we said, has a wee bit of crispness to it, a little bit of smoothness, and a wee bit of oily character. And then you've also got some nice, you just have that nice slightly oily fruitiness to this one as well. And yeah, I think it's a really nicely rounded beer, this one. Certainly up to the standards that we would expect of Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri. And I will say I've really gotten into this brewery over the last little while. One of my colleagues at the pub, Alan, he loves Nynäshamn and Närke. And yeah, I can really see why, having had a few more of these beers with him over the last little while, I've really kind of grown and you know, picked up his real enthusiasm for the brewery. I always liked them, but he's kind of encouraged it a little bit more, I have to say. But yeah, for me, certainly up to the standards that you'd expect from Nynäshamn, but I don't know if it can quite topple Pikla Pils or Landsort's Lager off the kind of top spot for me when it comes to this brewery. But yeah, definitely worth a try for something different. And as I said to you, Nynäshamn do very, very good stuff when it comes to traditional German styles of beer. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about this one. So this was the Ångbryggeriets 25-Årsöl, the 25th anniversary ale of Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri. I really enjoyed this one. So yeah, check it out if you get the chance. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Nynäshamns Ångbryggeri, and I will catch you guys again with another review. Check out my social media, check out their social media, and as I said earlier, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you'd like to see more reviews. But support your local breweries and you'll see more reviews coming up very, very soon. Slange it, skål, cheers.